got this offer from LinkedIn to try boosting a post for the first time. Everything didn't go quite as I expected. There's quite a few pitfalls. Spoiler alert, I actually did get this thing to eventually post, and I'm gonna show you all the things that I had to overcome to get that to happen. First, let me show you what it looks like when you're gonna actually do a boost. So I'm gonna pretend that I'm boosting this other one. What you do is you go in here, and this is going to only get you impressions. I'm using this just as a branding thing. I posted a couple of days ago about like SpyFu having twice as much data as SEMrush. So a reasonably good branding to just sort of get the word out there that SpyFu has twice as much data. What can go wrong? Try it out and see what happens. So what you do is you go in here and you get, you're going to get impressions, and then you choose an audience. And I don't think you should use anybody's suggested audience. That's one thing that I would definitely avoid doing. I just go and I create new. I just came up with a bunch of job titles specifically related to marketing, SEO, PPC, digital marketing in general. You don't need to like run a small budget. Like just run a big budget. And then if everything isn't working out the way you want it to, just cancel. Whatever you're willing to kind of like roll with. I ran through this, put in my credit card information and hit submit. I actually did that the night before I wanted to run it because I felt like there was going to be some kind of a process, and I didn't know what that process was, given that I've only done it never. I think I got this response in about 2 hours. The response was, your ad doesn't comply with our policies. Here's what happened. Something, non-standard text, use correct grammar. I'm like, I'm kind of insulted. I feel like my grammar and my punctuation is amazing. No excessive repetition. Let's have a look at what I did. My writing style, my punctuation, I know that it's not exactly standard, but are they having a problem with the way that I use hyphens, or did I put like too many spaces in here next to this colon? I mean, that's reasonable, but like, what are they getting at with this non-standard? I don't think that I have any spelling issues. Everything's spelled right. There's no, and then I'm like, oh, I use the middle finger emoji. I think it's kind of funny. That's not middle finger. So I removed that. I thought that that was probably the one thing, right? Because maybe we don't want to have a middle finger emoji. And so I submit it, and then it goes overnight, and then they come back and they're like, oh, now that you've removed that, now you're actually offensive. Like, not only are you using non-standard text, but you're using inappropriate language or image. I'm thinking, what is in this video that would be inappropriate or offensive? And they're like, LinkedIn does not allow ads that are vulgar. And I'm like, what am I like? How is that even a thing? Right. So I post this into Slack. I'm like, WTF is wrong. I'm like, oh, it's probably because I say WTF. I thought it was the middle finger, but it's actually the WTF. I remove that, send it back, and then I get the same thing back again. I realized that it's probably the JFC. I think it's probably offensive, probably broadly offensive. Yeah. I mean, I didn't think that like, those are definitely my vulgarities that I didn't really think of as vulgarities. What the I got the same thing back. Actually, I got the original one back. So once I got rid of the JFC, they're like, good, you're no longer offensive, but you're still using non-standard text. I did remove an asterisk as like my first salvo. I thought that was probably going to be the solid thing. When I clicked on this thing, which is actually a link, which I didn't really recognize as a link, there's additional information under here. And that additional information made it clear that I should not use excessive emojis or unrelated hashtags. Excessive emojis, which is pretty much how everybody writes all LinkedIn posts, and the unrelated hashtags. When I removed excessive emojis, everything worked. Okay, so here's the total amount of change that I made. Barely anything. We went back 3 or 4 times, and this is ultimately what wound up changing, right? So nothing here in the top, all the way down to here, nothing, no changes whatsoever. All these are exactly the same. Then I removed this one emoji here. This one over here on this side. This is the one that got accepted. And this is the original one that was declined. So this is like the worst of the worst. And this is the best of the best, apparently. So that's my first change. I'm going to scroll that all the way to the top. Let's see. No other changes until we get to right there. So I removed this emoji because I have too many emojis. So I removed that one. And then I removed, this was a key one. I replaced WTF with what is Google possibly. I have the middle finger. It was the first thing that I removed, and it really got me nowhere. So I don't know how much they're detecting that versus the frequency of these things. The next one is the JFC. So I switched out JFC for yo guys, and then I removed the world icon and changed this unrelated hashtag to just this sentence down here. Optimism is my biggest blind spot. That's it, right? Like I hardly made any real changes, but it took 4 backs and forths. I thought, man, I'm going to really just need to rewrite this. Everything I wrote is terrible. It turns out that there was relatively few things. So I had submitted this just before going on a podcast. And by the time I came out of the podcast, it had been approved and I gotten 6,000 additional impressions, like unapproved to approved to 6,000 impressions in the course of about an hour and a half. Let's see what it's doing now. Like, yeah, so it jumped from 1,100 impressions to about 7,400 impressions. And then it sat there. That cost about $113. They wanted to make sure that they can bill me for $100. Ad networks do this really often. That's why I wanted to set a high budget so that they could figure out how much they can actually bill me and that we'd actually get the right volume at the right time. Basically, before the weekend, it would be nice to be able to get impressions in so that I don't feel like I just want to boost the post and see what happens, but I don't really want to make everybody think that I'm advertising at them and such. Let's look at the analytics now. It looks like I've gotten a few additional likes and comments and such. Before I started, my average watch time was like 1 minute and 10 seconds on this thing. So clearly these ads are less engaged, at least with the video. This has spent about another $30 since I started making this video about 35 minutes ago. So they're rolling in the impressions relatively quickly. It looks like they're saying 4,800 impressions that are ads and then the rest are organic. That is actually not the case. Hopefully they're only billing me for these 4,800. I thought you might benefit from my mild amount of suffering. It's really interesting that they're very unspecific with what corrections they want you to make. This is really common and we could programmatically figure everything out if they gave us the exact answer, but also the number of changes that I had to make. Well, another thing that's interesting about them is that they warn you, hey, don't keep submitting, because if you keep submitting things that aren't valid, then we're going to hate your guts. I don't really have much to lose here. You guys are the ones that want my money, right? I don't really know what the root cause was. The WTF and the JFC were things that I needed to remove. I suspect the hashtag was in fact an issue. I really don't know if they care about the emojis. Just don't do the hashtags that are meaningless, those kinds of things. Hope you have a good one.